This crazy Viking terrified the enemy and earned the Victoria Cross. Anders Lassen was a Dane who fought in the British Commandos in the Second World War. He was the only non-Commonwealth recipient of the Victoria Cross, the highest award for gallantry in the face of the enemy. But who was this man? Beginnings. Anders Lassen was born on September 22, 1920 in Hovdingsgade, a large estate near Mern, Denmark. His father was a wealthy landowner and his mother was a descendant of Danish nobility. He had 2 brothers and 2 sisters and grew up in a privileged and comfortable environment. He had a cousin, Axel von den Busche, who, interestingly enough, was a German resistance member who tried to kill Hitler in 1943, but that's a story for another time. Lassen was not interested in following the conventional path of his family. He was a restless and adventurous spirit who loved hunting, sailing and boxing. He had a hot temper and a rebellious streak, often getting into trouble at school and with the authorities. He left school in 1938 with the lowest grades in his year, promptly joined the Danish Merchant Navy and sailed around the world. He loved adventure and danger, and often got into drunken brawls. Escape. In April 1940, Nazi Germany invaded Denmark and occupied the country in a matter of hours. Lassen was at sea on board the tanker Eleonora Maersk, which was ordered to sail to a German or Italian port. But Lassen and some of his crewmates refused to comply and persuaded the captain to change course to Bahrain, a British port in the Persian Gulf. In Bahrain, Lassen met an agent from the British Special Operations Executive, or SOE, a secret organisation that conducted sabotage and espionage missions behind enemy lines. SOE and No. 62 Commando. The SOE officer soon realised that the Danish seaman was a born fighter, and so immediately recruited Lassen for a new, elite commando unit. He was just the kind of man the small-scale raiding force, otherwise known as No. 62 Commando, were looking for. Shortly after, Lassen would take part in clandestine small-scale raids against railways, airfields and other important infrastructure across Northwest Europe, North Africa, Greece, Yugoslavia and Italy. Operation Postmaster. His first mission was Operation Postmaster, a daring raid on 3 enemy ships anchored in Fernando Po, a Spanish colony in West Africa. On January 14, 1942, Lassen and his comrades boarded the ships under cover of darkness, overpowered the crews and sailed them away to Lagos, Nigeria. For this feat, Lassen was commissioned as a second lieutenant and awarded his first military cross. Special Boat Section. In early 1943, No. 62 Commando was disbanded and its members assigned to other units. Lassen was posted to the Middle East to serve in the Special Boat Section, then attached to the Special Air Service. In the SBS, Lassen eventually rose to become a major by October 1944. He was awarded 2 further bars to his military cross on 27 September 1943 and 15 February 1944, making him one of the most decorated soldiers in the British Army. Raid on Santorini. On 24 April 1944, Lassen led a successful SBS raid on the island of Santorini, taking out the garrison on the island and blowing up the building housing the radio installation with time bombs. Lassen and his 19 English and Greek SBS raiders, with just 2 casualties, successfully withdrew on 2 schooners. Due to its violence, the operation became known as Lassen's Bloodbath. Indeed, SBS Corporal Dick Holmes, who worked with Lassen, said, quote, "He had an ability to transform himself into a killing machine, to perform the task with a panache that earned him a reputation of a killer of Germans par excellence. A controversial character. Anders Lassen earned the respect and admiration of his men and his superiors, but he also had a reputation for being insubordinate, impulsive and reckless. He often disobeyed orders or changed plans without authorization. He had a disdain for authority figures and formalities. He frequently got into fights with other soldiers or civilians over trivial matters and drank heavily at times. Lassen was said to have a fiery temper and a sharp tongue that spared no one. For example, according to an account in the recent book by Thomas Harder. Special Forces hero Anders Lassen, VC, MC. Not long after arriving in the Middle East in early 1943, he was offended by something said by his commanding officer Lord Jellicoe and hit him. But Jellicoe did not want to lose a good man, and so they drove back to their camp together. However, despite his flaws, Lassen was also admired for his remarkable courage, skill, and initiative. He was a charismatic man, generous, loyal, with a dark sense of humour. He had many friends among his fellow commandos and among the local people he encountered during his missions. Lassen appears to have had a lot in common with the equally pugnacious Robert Blair Paddy Mayne of the SAS. Though we can see no evidence of them actually having met, it seems a fair possibility, given that the Special Boat Section was part of the SAS during the war. Using our imagination, no doubt it would have been interesting to have been a fly on the wall of some bar at the time, watching the fireworks as they drank together. His Last Vow. However, Lassen's most notable fight took place during the night and early morning hours from April 8 to 9, 1945. Lassen, now a major, was ordered to command a raid during Operation Roast on the north shore of Lake Comacchio in Italy. Operation Roast was part of the Allied Spring 1945 offensive and was ultimately intended to push the German army back across the River Po and out of Italy. The goal of Major Lassen's raid was to make it appear as if a much larger force was conducting an amphibious landing. Lassen and the 17 commandos under his watch infiltrated the area posing as fishermen to gain access to a road leading into a nearby town. However, a suspicious sentry stopped them, and shortly after a full-scale firefight erupted. Lassen immediately charged the enemy with hand grenades, destroying the first machine gun nest and its MG-42s. Despite withering machine gun fire from 4 other positions, he raced forward and engaged another machine gun nest, while his fellow commandos provided covering fire. Lassen killed more Germans and destroyed more machine guns. He then rallied and reorganised his commando unit, which had taken serious casualties and was beginning to wilt in the face of further sustained enemy fire. He then proceeded to storm a third enemy position. Advancing alone, he lobbed hand grenades at every muzzle flash. Eventually, as he shouted for the remainder of the surviving Germans to come out with their hands up, he was caught by a burst of machine gun fire. Before falling, Lassen flung a final grenade. The explosion took out more Germans, and thus his surviving men were able to take the final position. Lassen, mortally wounded, ordered his remaining men to withdraw. He did not want to slow his men down, thus endangering them, and so refused medical evacuation. At last he succumbed to his injuries. He was just 24 years old. Victoria Cross. For his gallantry and self-sacrifice in Operation Roast, Anders Lassen was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, the equivalent to America's Medal of Honor and the highest honor for bravery in the British Empire. He was the only non-Commonwealth soldier to receive the VC in the Second World War. He was also awarded the Croix de Guerre by France and the Medal of Freedom by the United States. He was buried with full military honours at the Argenta Gap War Cemetery in Italy. Legacy. Anders Lassen was a remarkable man who lived a remarkable life. He was a hero who fought for freedom and justice against tyranny and oppression. He was a legend who inspired generations of soldiers and civilians alike. It was Anders Lassen, the drunken, insubordinate Dane who brawled his way to the Victoria Cross. We hope you enjoyed this short presentation on Anders Lassen. If you did, please take a moment to like, comment and subscribe. See you soon.